Champions. Today I want you to grab a pencil and your notes or your sketchbook or just a blank piece of paper. We're going to look at the notes pages first before we get into our main project. So the main idea, we're going to recap what a still life is, as well as the portrait. So with the Frida Kahlo Surrealism portrait, an artwork that includes a person or an animal. And then the still life is not having a person or animal as the subject matter in the artwork, but it's an arrangement of objects on a table. So our focus is on the still life today. And then the elements and principles that are extremely important to this project, we're going to really focus on value. So value describes how light something is or how dark it is. So light versus dark in an artwork. And then the principle of design we're really going to focus on is emphasis. So emphasis is the creation of a focal point in an artwork. So what should the viewer focus on? Emphasis draws the viewer's eye to a particular area of the artwork first. Think of this as the most important or main idea. So our still life is going to be in black and white, but then our point of emphasis, or the focus, is going to be one thing popping out in color. So we're going to use space as well, because we're going to have perspective and composition and objects overlapping, but the main points are value and emphasis. So first things first, get out a piece of paper. I have a neutral gray, so if you have a gray one, that might work best, but any color will work. Then I'm going to use what's called vine charcoal. You can use a pencil as well, but the vine charcoal is what I'm going to use. It's really light charcoal, and that's what I'm going to use to just sketch in my composition. So the composition, the layout of your picture, you want to think about putting at least 5 objects in, having things that are in front overlapping the things that are behind them, and try to go from top to bottom, side to side, corner to corner. So you don't want everything focused in the middle or over to one side. We want balance. So balance is another principle of design we're going to incorporate, but again, emphasis and value are the main points. So with my vine charcoal, I'm going to sketch in what I see. You draw what you see with your eyes. You don't just make it up out of your head. So we're doing a fall still life, or harvest, in the, think autumn, otoño, but you can come up with any objects that you have at home. So if you want to do it symbolically with things that are important to you, go for it. If you want to put together things that are related to fall, because maybe you have pumpkins and stuff at home too, go for it. I'm going to draw what I see in front of me here at Oakview, and that is pumpkins and gourds, and I got some ceramic pots and some sunflowers, which, if I'm honest, are kind of dead right now, but we'll draw them as we see them. So I'm going to start, keep it light till you get it right, because even with vine charcoal you can erase it. So I have an eraser handy too. So let's start with something I see in front. I have my little googly-eyed monsters in front too, so I'm going to draw that. That's down here in front. Some of the cloth overlaps it. And boom, I have my little box. It's a googly-eyed guy. One eye's bigger than the other. Crazy. Then, next to that, I kind of have a green pumpkin. So again, look up at the objects that you're drawing every 3 to 5 seconds. Again, I'm super light, not getting all the details in. Then there's an orange pumpkin with a strange shape behind my little monster, and it's on its side because it can't even stand up on its own. It's got a weird stem coming out, and boom. Then I have a funky owl statue, kind of like it. It's perched behind those pumpkins, and it's in profile, which means it is looking off to the side. So again, I'm not worried about all the details, I'm just sketching it in, the composition. Behind that, I do see a large pumpkin. And again, pumpkins are forms, not shapes, because they're three-dimensional. But you look for the shapes to create the form. So it's not a perfect circle. There's bulges, and even some pumpkins have warts on them. Let's see, I have a clay jug over here, and then I have a watering can. I can't even see the watering can, but I see the little pumpkin. that I have sitting right on top of it. It's a cute little guy. And it is kind of perfectly round. So, I've sketched in my composition. We've hit corner to corner. Oh, I have another gourd over here. I'll just have part of it cropped off the page. And then the fabric comes underneath. So I've hit corner to corner, edge to edge, sketched it in. So then you got to determine, all right, what object do I want to be colored and focused on? I think I will choose the little ghosty guy. I think he's pretty funny. So you'll leave your colored guy for last. Right now we're going to do everything else in black and white with value. So in order to differentiate the different objects, you got to have light areas, dark areas, and medium areas. So the darkest darks will be the shadows. The lightest lights will be the brightest highlights. And then you're going to have a series of grays in between, because black plus white equals gray. So you're going to have some white chalk or charcoal. You can still have your vine charcoal. I have some compressed, really dark charcoal. Again, if you don't have these materials, you use whatever you have at home. You could just use a pencil and have really dark areas. You can blend some areas with like a Kleenex or Q-tip, or you can use a series of lines to create dark shadows, and then you can erase where it is its lightest light. You can use a lighter colored paper to shine through as your highlights. Anyway, let's say I'm getting this pumpkin back here first. So I'm just going to lightly get in with the vine charcoal, because again, vine charcoal is a little lighter. So I'm just kind of shading it in lightly. I'll just do part of the pumpkin, so you're not watching this forever. I have what's called a blending stump. You can use your finger, you can use a Kleenex or a Q-tip like I told you, or you can use something called a blending stump. It's basically just rolled up paper. So I'll show you the blending stump works, but also your finger. And you kind of get a neutral gray. Once you have your gray, that's like your base color, you can then add in shadow. So again, I'm looking at what I'm drawing. I see a shadow come up here. There's shadow kind of in between those grooves of the pumpkin. This one's all in shadow behind here. And then I'm going to blend either again with your finger, or with your blending stump, or your Q-tip or Kleenex. You can blendy blend blend. Alright, if an area gets too dark, you can go over it with white, or you can erase. So let's say I got that shadow way too dark. You could erase a little bit. See how you can erase the chalk and charcoal, or you could use some of your white to lighten it up. Oh, that didn't work so well. You could use your white to lighten it up. Boom. So let's say my shadow was perfect. I'm going to add some bright, bright highlights with the white where the light's really shining and reflecting. Then let's say I'm getting this pumpkin down here. It's even darker because this one was kind of green. I'm going to use that compressed charcoal to just kind of shade it in as my base color. Maybe I'll get my blending stump and blend it up. See how that's a darker? The compressed charcoal is a lot darker of a base than your vine charcoal, that skinny, fragile kind that I had. And charcoal in general is fragile, so you want to be careful. You don't want to break it. You don't need to Hulk smash. Just glide across the paper. Then, if it's too light, you can use a regular eraser, or I have this special gum eraser. It's called a gum eraser because it's sticky. You can pull it apart, and that's how it cleans itself. So if it's really dirty, you can just pull it apart and see how it gets lighter. Put it back together. It's kind of fun. It's like silly putty in a way. But you can pull highlights in different areas to make them lighter. So I got it too dark in the beginning. I can pull up some of that charcoal, and then if I want, I can clean it off by pulling it apart. And then if I want to make some shadows even darker, get that in there, blend with your finger or blending tool. And then of course highlights, brightest whites. And actually this pumpkin has some spots on it, so I'll have some areas that have the spots, and I'll just tap those in. So they're sort of blended, but then the bright, bright highlights, the light is really shining on it right over here. So I'm really looking at the shape of the highlights, and boom, Got it. Now, let's say I finished all of the black and white areas, because we want every area to be covered. And now I'm onto my colored object. So obviously you can't use your black and your grays for your colored object. You would use your colored chalk. So I have some warms, I have some cools. Again, if you don't have chalk and charcoal, you can use whatever materials you have. I'm going to start by getting the googly eyes, because I glued some funny googly eyes on these things to make them look like almost Pac-Man ghosts. And there's a bright spot in the googly eye. I'll just brighten that up. Boom. Then this googly-eyed ghost that I'm looking at is actually a yellow object. So I'm going to lightly shade it in with my yellow all over. So you're thinking, what on earth? There's no value if it's just all yellow. Well, we'll get there. So once it's all yellow, you'll use your Blendy Blend tool, your finger, or your blending stump. And now it's all one value, your neutral yellow. Well, the light is hitting it at the top. So I need to use white on the top to lighten up that yellow. And I can blend it in. So now that's our light. There are a few really bright highlights where it's shiniest and the light hits it. So again, neutral yellow is in the front. The lighter value is on top where the light hits it. Then there's a shadow on this side here where no light's hitting it because it's blocked by the pumpkins. So we're not going to use black for the shadow. We're going to use its complementary color. So if you remember color theory, on a color wheel, yellow's at the very tip top. What's at the very tip bottom of the color wheel? The opposite of yellow is violeta purple. So we're not using black for shadows on our colored object. We're using its opposite contrasting complementary color. So it's all in shadow, so I'm going to just go over my yellow with a little purple, and then when I blend it, I'm going to get a neutral gray shadow. Isn't that amazing? So every object should have a clear medium value, light value, and dark value. So a minimum of 3 values on every object. So I kind of have my dark shadow, my brightest highlights, and actually I have a variety of medium grays. So you might have more than 3, but you want a minimum of 3. I'm going to show you some other still lifes that I've done with emphasis. So I did it all in black and white, and then you can tell that the football was my focal point. Football to me is something that represents fall, the fall season, so I wanted the football to be popping out, being the focal point and the main thing that the viewers of my artwork see. So everything in black and white, I filled the page except one area with emphasis. All right, the football. I'll show you another finished one where that little yellow ghosty was my amazing focal point. So again, in every object you could see a minimum of 3 values, brightest whites, medium grays, and dark black shadows. But then your colored object, you use its complementary color for the shadow. And I'll show you, if you have other objects at your house that you're doing with color, we showed you yellow and purple. If we flip it over, if you have an object that is green that you want as your focal point, maybe that green pumpkin that we were talking about earlier, if you want your green object to be your main focal point, you'll do your base value green. Your shadows will be the opposite of green, and if you remember your color wheel, the opposite of green is primary rojo red. So I'd look at the green pumpkin, the shadows over here, really on this side, and then it kind of comes down. And when you mix your opposite green and red, you'll get your awesome neutral shadow for your darkest value. And then again, white will be for your lighter sides and bright highlights. If you have an object that is blue, let's say, that you're doing, maybe you have a blue ghosty. So kind of like the yellow one on the front. We'll give it its googly eyes. Well, the neutral or the medium color would be the regular blue. The highlight would be with white. And then the opposite of blue is a little orange. So you would get a nice neutral shadow with your orange. So blue and orange are opposites, green and red are opposites, and then if you remember from the front, yellow and purple are opposites. You pick one thing to be the focal point, emphasis with color, the rest in black and white. Try to have value, try to have emphasis, try to use space for your composition, top to bottom, side to side. You fifth graders are going to amaze me with your creative genius. So keep up the good work, ask questions as needed, review this video as needed, and trust and believe you will achieve. Adios.